In this video, we are going to talk about the fact about Henry Ford. So before starting this video, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. 37 The first cars were not made by Henry Ford. Contrary to popular belief, Henry Ford was not the one who invented the idea of an automobile. Carl Benz, however, was the one who accomplished it in 1885. Only 11 years after the first automobiles were built, Ford began producing vehicles. He was the first to mass-produce inexpensive cars in the US, nevertheless. This made it possible for middle-class Americans at the time to afford cars. The Mobile T, the first car produced by his company, completely altered the American transportation system. That's one interesting detail about Henry Ford. 36. Henry Ford had held a job at an electrical company before pursuing his aspirations. 35 Ford never thought about becoming a farmer, despite coming from a family of farmers. He discovered his affinity for steam engines and machines. He joined the Thomas Edison Illuminating Company since his upbringing prevented him from having the money to follow his aspirations. Ford was inspired by Edison to follow his ideas of creating dependable, inexpensive, gasoline-powered cars, after spending 6 years working there. 34 Henry Ford's dream of producing cars at reasonable prices came to pass. Henry Ford formally founded Ford Motors in 1903. The company initially sold its model automobiles for about $600 to $950. After numerous tries and careful research, they reduced the cost to just $290. By 1927, middle-class Americans in America began to have access to cheap Ford Motors vehicles. The beginning of Ford's extensive history of manufacturing automobiles. 33 By nature, Henry Ford was an inventor. Despite the fact that we only know him as the creator of Ford Motors, he is much more than that. Henry Ford held 161 distinct patents, which is one of the most fascinating yet little-known facts about him. Ford had a lifelong fascination with both inventions and science in general. He continued to be an inventor and scientist long after founding the vehicle firm. 32 One of Henry Ford's endeavors was the Amazon. Ford created plans to develop a sizable city in the Amazon because he was constantly searching for the next big thing. Unfortunately, his efforts were in vain because it was never successful. Although it may seem odd, Ford's business model called for a city that constantly supplied rubber. 31 The goal of Henry Ford was to assist people with impairments. In addition to his love of invention, Ford also had a soft spot for people with impairments. In keeping with this, he hired people with impairments without hesitation for his industrial facilities. People with disabilities made up about 20% of the workforce at Ford Motor Company during Henry Ford's lifetime. 30 Henry Ford had a fortune. Ford cars generated about $15 million in sales during his tenure. After oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller, he was America's second richest man. Henry Ford's net worth reached its pinnacle of $200 billion following his company's significant success in 1920. Ford's market share decreased after his passing, but the success of the firm made him one of America's richest people in history. 29 President Wilson got Henry Ford to run for a seat in the Senate. As Ford became a big name in business, former President Woodrow Wilson convinced him to run for Senate. However, Ford did not want to spend even a dime for election campaigns. Without spending on the campaign, Ford lost the candidacy by only 4,500 votes. For someone who did not break the bank for running, this was already a remarkable achievement. 28 The first moving assembly line was established by Henry Ford. The company of Henry Ford relentlessly looked for ways to improve efficiency and bring the costs of industrial production down. In 1913, the very first moving assembly line came into the picture. Although it was Ransom E. Olds who formulated the concept, Ford was responsible for converting the still assembly lines into moving ones. The assembly line became mechanically driven using this technique. Workers were able to concentrate on other duties as a result, which raised production levels. 27 Moving assembly by Ford cut down on production time by 70%. The time it took to complete a chassis before the moving lines was 728 minutes. Ford's idea, though, allowed them to reduce the time to 93 minutes. In addition, it only took 24 seconds to construct a Model T car. Having said that, Ford Motor Company revolutionized not just the auto industry, but also the development of technology and infrastructure. Undoubtedly, this is one of the most motivating Henry Ford facts to date. 26 Ford's Peace Initiative was dubbed a ship of fools by the media. Ford never shied away from advancing world peace. He embarked on a peace mission as a result in 1915. He provided both moral and monetary backing for the European expedition. But the press did not like it and called it the ship of fools. 25 Never did Henry Ford underpay his employees. Ford has always been pro-employee, even before the company became organized as a legitimate business. He thought that happy workers performed better for the business. When compared to other businesses in the sector, Ford's employees received nearly double the standard pay at the time. As a result, he attracted a large number of talented and skilled employees. This eventually gave his business control over the design and manufacturing of his cars. 24 One of the most popular vehicles sold worldwide is the Model T by Henry Ford. The Ford Model T, which was manufactured from 19 until 1927, is regarded as the most important automobile of the 20th century. It is still one of the most popular cars of all time, having sold over $16.5 million. 23 The charcoal briquette was a creation of Henry Ford. Blocks of compressed coal dust known as charcoal briquettes are used as kindling. Who would have guessed that Ford invented this necessary outdoor item? Many oak scraps that could no longer be used for the cars were present in Ford's manufacturing facilities. E.g., Kingsford, the brother-in-law of Ford, proposed they construct a charcoal production facility to utilize up this extra wood. Ford named it Kingsford Charcoal after him at his suggestion. Kingsford continues to be a leading manufacturer of charcoal briquettes in the sector. 22 Additionally, Henry Ford owned an airline. During World War I, Henry Ford founded the Ford Aeroplane Company. While the business understandably didn't take off, it still set a sturdy foundation for the eventual Ford Trimotor airplane. Produced between 1928 and 1932, the Trimotor has been featured in the film Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. 21 The Henry Ford Museum features all his inventions. On October 21, 1929, Ford opened the Henry Ford Museum. Today, you can still see a collection of his inventions and their role in America's progress for the last 200 years at Dearborn, Michigan. General admissions to the museum comes free for those 2 and under, while the fee is $16.50 for those 3 to 11 years old. For adults, entrance costs $20 for teenagers and the youth, while it charges $22 for seniors. 20 The Henry Ford Museum has some of the weirdest artifacts. Some tourists may find the ticket for the museum a bit pricey, but it's all worth it. One of the strangest artifacts, you will see there is a vial of Thomas Edison's last breath. 19 Henry Ford was also the inventor of the plastic-bodied car. Ford continued to invent well into his old age. Ford created a model of a vehicle with a plastic body in August 1941. Its biodegradable body, which is constructed entirely of panels from soybeans, is astounding. Ford originally intended to transition to this design in order to reduce the price and weight of its new vehicles. However, the project was delayed and ultimately abandoned during the height of World War II. 18 Henry Ford once bought a schoolhouse. You might know Mary Had a Little Lamb as nursery rhyme, but you wouldn't imagine its connection to Henry Ford. According to Ford, The property he bought in Sterling, Massachusetts, was the one described in the song. When Ford bought the Redstone Schoolhouse, the building had only been used for storage. Later on, Ford repurposed it into a proper school, operating until 1951. Ford even published a book about it, entitled The Story of Mary and Her Little Lamb and Ford Ideals. 17 Henry Ford, despite producing automobiles, had never been a racing enthusiast. Ford never enjoyed the rush of racing, despite devoting so much attention to the manufacture of automobiles. To advertise his goods and services, he recognized the necessity to take part in racing events. Despite never being a fan of the sport, he managed to earn a spot in the 1996 Motorsports Hall of Fame thanks to his efforts. 16. A movie has been made about Henry Ford's life. Ford, The Man and the Machine, which was published in 1987, covered Henry Ford's life and eventual legacy. Cliff Robertson played the lead part of Henry Ford in the television movie, which was based on the biography compiled by Robert Lacey and directed by Alan Eastman. 15. Henry Ford's automobiles were favored by Bonnie and Clyde. Clyde Barrow frequently committed his heists in Ford cars, even though that may not have been the finest advertising for their automobiles. Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker rose to fame as the era's most infamous outlaws. Rumor has it that the two wrote letters to Ford congratulating him for the amazing automobiles he was producing. 14. Henry Ford was favored by some to run for president. People began urging him to run for president in 1961 as a result of his innovations and contributions to society. Even Ford for President memorabilia was produced and distributed by Ford's followers. Ford, though, was uninterested in politics. 13. Clara Bryant was wed to Henry Ford. On April 11, 1888, he married Clara Jane Bryant after selling the family farm. Edsel Ford, the only child of their union, was born. He was eventually succeeded as Ford's owner by his son, who was subsequently succeeded by Henry Ford II. 12. Even now, the Henry Ford Hospital is still open. As a tertiary care facility with 877 beds, the Henry Ford Hospital welcomed its first patients in October 1915. At some point, it also possessed a research and educational campus in Detroit, Michigan's New Center neighborhood. Additionally, the Henry Ford system did not just stop at one hospital. Ford currently operates 29 medical facilities, 8 hospitals, 24 pharmacies, and 8 emergency rooms. The Henry Ford Medical Group employs approximately 40 different specializations and over 1,200 doctors in total. 11. In Detroit, a community college bears Henry Ford's name. Henry Ford College, a 2-year public college located in Dearborn, Michigan, was founded in 1983. The school's first culinary arts degree was established there, and it was given the Ford moniker to recognize the growth of the co-curricular and academic programs there. 10. Henry Ford had many iconic quotes. Aside from his brilliant inventions, Ford also gained a following for his outlook in life. Among his famous lines was, "Money is like an arm or leg, use it or lose it." 9. The Greenfield Village is Henry Ford's collection of buildings. In 1933, Ford established Greenfield Village at Dearborn, Michigan. As a collection of historic buildings, Ford used this place like his personal portfolio. To create the village, Ford bought 100 properties, moving all of them into one village and organizing it like a real community. 8. Henry Ford was another opponent of smoking. Ford was so opposed to smoking that he wrote a book outlining all the health issues and issues that can arise from smoking frequently. These details about Henry Ford simply demonstrate that he was a man of action. 7.2 years before he passed away, Henry Ford retired. Ford retired in 1945 as a result of having a stroke. His grandson Henry Ford II succeeded him as company president. Ford passed away on April 7, 1947, at the ripe old age of 83 from a brain hemorrhage, around 2 years after he had retired. 6. A superb inventor. Although Henry Ford is best known for his work with the Ford Motor Company, he was also a prolific inventor in other fields. Ford held more than 160 patents by the time he passed away in 1947. The majority of these patents were for tools intended to simplify work. One of Henry Ford's inventions was a method for making charcoal briquettes, a compressed coal dust block used for kindling, using wood scraps from the Model T. Ford also developed a vehicle with a body made of soybean-based biodegradable plastic. 5. He was employed by Thomas Edison. Henry Ford hated farming despite the fact that he was raised there. Ford traveled to Detroit in 1879 at the age of 16 in order to seek employment, leaving his family behind. Ford worked as a steam engine serviceman, an apprentice machinist, and a pocket watch repairman throughout the course of the following 10 years. When Ford was employed as an engineer by the Detroit-based Edison Illuminating Company, it was his big break. Ford advanced fast through the ranks and received the chief engineer title in 1893. In 1896, Ford was subsequently introduced to Thomas Edison, and the two eventually grew close. 4. He made cars affordable for the poor. On a farm in Springwells Township, Michigan, Henry Ford was raised in poverty. As a result, he always had a penchant for aiding the underprivileged, which is exactly what he did as he grew older. As was already established, Ford revolutionized the auto industry by introducing the moving assembly, which slashed the cost and time required to produce a car. Because of this, the Model T was just $825 in 1908, and it got cheaper every year after that until the 1920. 3. He valued his workers. Henry Ford was always a pro-employee guy, as he believed that happy employees would be more productive. Ford first shocked the world in 1914 when he offered his workers $5 per day, which more than doubled most workers' rates, and made Ford the best-paying company in the US. Ford's employee-focused efforts didn't stop there. In 1926, Ford introduced a new, reduced workweek consisting of 5 8-hour days. 2. An advocate for persons with disabilities. Henry Ford had a big heart and was always ready to help the disadvantaged members of society. One particular group Ford had a soft spot for was the disabled. To help them, Ford made sure that the blind, deaf, and other people living with disabilities could get jobs in his company. By the 1920s, more than 20% of the Ford Motor Company workforce had some form of disability. 1. A conspiracy theorist. Ford may have been a brilliant businessman and inventor, but he wasn't immune to conspiracy theories. Ford mostly shared the conspiracy theories on the Dearborn Independent, a weekly newspaper Henry Ford published from 1919 to 1927. One of the most contentious stories published in the Dearborn Independent was a set of booklets titled The International Jew, which portrayed J. That's it for today. We hope you found our video interesting. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and share it with others. Also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any of our new uploads. In the end, thanks for watching, and see you next time.